When people talk about being Jewish and talk about Judaism, to this very day, they can't agree on a definition of what that means. Why? Because for some it's a nationality, for some it's a religious identity. And for us, the religion, in fact, we shun religion. We feel that religion is the problem between people on the planet in no uncertain terms, that religion is not the pathway that leads us to a relationship with God. It is truth that leads us, and righteousness that leads us to a great relationship with the Creator, and not someone's religious tenets. So in the Hebraic understanding of what a Messiah or Mashiach was, it was not a singular concept. In other words, there's no expectation in the Hebraic text of a singular person to come and save us. It's a plural concept. In Hebraic culture and history.
Give us references. Before we started, we called I'll call him a mutual friend, and he called you elder. But your business card here says, I know the title is Sar.
Right.
Ahmadiel Ben Yehuda.
Got it. That's
who we are with today on Something Nice with Dinano. Thank you for joining us. I am your host, Dinilo Shanga Mekuto. That's my ID name. But here on this podcast, I go by the name Dinano Damano, something I made up. Thank you for joining us on Something Nice with Dinano. We continue to bring you meaningful conversations and interviews. And today we have a special somebody. As I had said, Elder Joshua Maponga calls him his elder, Ahmadiel Ben Yehuda, title Sar. Please just tell us about the name. Welcome to the podcast. We are so pleased to be with you here today, and I hope we're going to have a meaningful conversation. Sar Ahmadiel.
Thank you very much, Dinano.
Please tell us what the name stands for, or what it means, where it comes from.
Well, I'm a Hebrew Israelite, African Hebrew Israelite, and the name is Hebrew. Ahmadiel means I stand for God. Ben is son, and Yehuda is Judah. So I identify my tribal identity as that of the tribe of Judah. I'm an Israelite, Hebrew Israelite. That's my nationality. I was born and raised in the U.S., but in my search for identity and purpose in life, it led me to this path and to Israel. But allow me first to give all honor and praises to the Holy One of Israel, to the God of Israel, and to all of the anointed personages that have preceded us on this plane. I greet you. Peace. Shalom.
Shalom. What does shalom mean? What language is it? I always hear it.
It's Hebrew. Shalom is one of the main words that you hear, if people, understanding the Hebraic connection. Shalom is the first word that they'll probably understand. And Hebrew is what's considered to be an Afro-Semitic or Afro-Asiatic language. That's the official classification of the language Hebrew. It is sisters to Arabic and sisters to also the Ethiopic languages of Ge'ez, the ancient Ge'ez, and the modern Amharic. Okay. So it is an Afro-Semitic language. And so shalom, you hear salam in the Ethiopian languages. You hear assalam alaikum, shalom alaikum. They're very, very closely connected.
Your card says Minister of Information and National Spokesperson, Advisor, I'm assuming in South Africa, in Zambia, DRC jurisdictions, Sacred Visitation Tour Guide. And then it goes like, at the top it says African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem.
Right.
I've been hosting a couple of people who speak on issues of Black Hebrews, African Israelites, African Hebrews. We were talking off air about me hosting Ron, hosting Bishop Nathanyel, I hosted a brother from Tanzania, Yahunde Batakane, last week. The interview is dropping soon on Something Nice with Dinano. But you guys seemingly say the same thing, but you differ here and there.
Mm-hmm.
What are you saying as Sar of African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem?
Well, first of all, I represent a community of 3,000 plus people who live actually in Israel. And our history is that we were 90% of us, well, I can't even say that because we have now fourth and fifth generation born there in Israel. But the roots of the community came out of the Americas, particularly North America, and particularly Chicago and Detroit and Washington, D.C., which is where I have come from, where I was born, rather. But being born in those lands did not make you an American. You know, a cat can, I love what Malcolm X used to always say. He said, a cat can have kittens in an oven, but that doesn't make them biscuits. And so, you know, we don't identify as being American. African Americans made no sense. We wanted to know what our nationality was, what our historical roots were in ancestry. And in that search, going back generations, it led us to Israel. And we consider Israel to be our ancestral home. It is northeast Africa. We know beyond any argument that Israel is located on the African tectonic plate. The people there 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago would have looked like yourself and myself, and at least myself, but other South
Why
Africans.
not me? Okay.
I am the product of the miscegenation that went on in America. You know, my father's mother was white. And in fact, my father's mother was Jewish. Didn't know that until many years later. She never told me.
What is Jewish?
That's interesting. Jewish is simply adherence to the religion of Judaism. And it is a European religion. It is a European religious identity.
Okay.
Which I don't.
And you are not?
I do not identify. We do not identify as being Jewish. We are Judeans, and it's a big difference.
What's a Judean?
A Judean is he's from the tribe of Judah, and so for us it's more a nationality. It is a connection to a people as opposed to a religious identity. When people talk about being Jewish and talk about Judaism, to this very day they can't agree on a definition of what that means. Why? Because for some it's a nationality, for some it's a religious identity. And for us, the religion, in fact, we shun religion. We feel that religion is the problem between people on the planet in no uncertain terms, that religion is not the pathway that leads us to a relationship with God. It is truth that leads us and righteousness that leads us to a great relationship with the Creator, and not someone's religious tenets.
So you wouldn't call people over to your movement because you are against, okay, I'm going to take it further and say organized religion. So you wouldn't call people to join the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem because you're against
This is not
religion.
something you join. This is something you identify with.
Okay.
And there are tenets based on principles of truth, whether it be historical truth or it be genetic truth or it be biological truth. There are tenets that we have applied in our lives that we feel that everyone would resonate with. Not everyone, but people who make truth of value to them, that it would present to them a need to make some changes in their diet, in their social relationships, in their relationships with their wives and children, what they teach their children, etc. So truth is what is the great master.
Okay.
You know, and the God of Israel is a God of truth. And Yeshua even made the statement. He said that ye shall know the truth, and the truth would set you free. And so our message is that the people on the planet, they're not free. They're not free from the chains and shackles of mental and psychological chains and shackles of these systems that are in place. We were told in the book of Revelation that the whole world would be deceived. And so it was our mission, and going back to your original question, we identified as being Israelites. And so that teaching led us to when do we actually return back to our ancestral land. And our spiritual leader, Ben Ami, in 1966 received a vision. And he was instructed that in the following year that he would lead our people out of America. So in 1967, based on his instructions and based on the help of those who were around him, we left America, the confines of America, and went into Liberia, West Africa. And that was regarded for us as a spiritual sojourn, as a spiritual cleansing station for us. And we went into the interior of West Africa, of Liberia, and for the next 2.5 years endured many hardships. That community, the pioneers, made a decision to endure those hardships of poisonous snakes and driver ants and malaria and dysentery. And they endured for that period, and by 1969, we felt it was ready to continue on. And so in 1969, the remainder of the group lived or moved to Israel.
So, Sar, I want us to maybe start from the specific yourself and then go to the general.
Okay.
How did you get to identify? Tell us about your personal journey as an African Hebrew Israelite of Jerusalem. And after you do that, help someone who might be what you are, but doesn't know. And how do they get to identify and find their true identity, as you guys say?
You know, there's a promise, seek and ye shall find, and there's a formula there. And I wasn't satisfied, as an adolescent in America growing up. Good education, supposedly, the better schools, nice middle class neighborhood and parenting and what have you. But none of that really appealed to me. And when I went through an awakening first to the reality of the condition of my people as Africans in America, I was very angry. I guess you could say in modern terminology, I became radicalized. I read the Malcolm X. I read our sister Angela Davis. I read H. Rap Brown. I read those eye-opening texts of the decade of the late 70s, early 70s, late 60s, 70s, and what have you. And that was my awakening. And so the next step was, well, why are we suffering like this? Why is it that we've tried everything? We've pursued the economics, we've pursued the politics, we've pursued, the right to vote, all of these things, civil rights, but nothing made our condition any better. And so the question became, well, what is the problem? And for some strange reason, I used to always keep a Bible handy. And that was strange for me because I had almost gotten to the point, in fact, I was an agnostic. I wasn't an atheist, but I was an agnostic. And there's a fine difference there. I didn't yet see the evidence for the existence of God in our lives. And so that was still something that I kept close. And at times of trouble, personal trouble and meditative moments, I would always grab it and I'd just flip it open. And without fail, Dinano, without fail, something on that page would speak to me. And so I always kept that close. And I felt that was something in my life that I needed to ground me. And so in my search, I had a girlfriend in Washington, D.C., and she was from Detroit. She actually went to Howard University Law School. And so went up to visit with her, and her brother-in-law invites me out one Saturday, and I go to this YMCA, and there's a brother there, an elder brother, long white hair down to his shoulders, and he's teaching about the identity of the African in America being Hebrew Israelite. And it resonated with me. And the scriptures he used made sense to me. And I came back.
Take us back, Elder Sar, to those scriptures that spoke to you, that resonated with you. Maybe the ones you'd open in the Bible and they would speak to your spirit, and maybe the ones that this elder referred to in the Bible.
The main ones that I think we all, as who've been on this path, identify with is from the book of Deuteronomy, one of the Mosaic texts, where Moses is laying out different. In fact, in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, very specifically, he lays out. He says, if you follow the instructions I'm giving you, all of these things you'll be blessed with. And those run from the first verse to the 15th verse, or the 14th verse of 28th chapter. Then in the 15th verse, he says, but if you do not listen to these instructions and follow these words, all of these curses shall come upon you. So we were given blessings and curses. Now, in our mind, coming out of a Greco-Roman, Jesus-oriented society, when you hear curses, you think thunderbolts that some guy in a big chair up in the cloud is throwing down. And it just had to be reinterpreted from the perspective of that there are consequences when you don't follow instructions. When your parents told you to do this and don't do that, there were consequences if they were God-fearing and responsible parents. Nowadays, modern parenting methods, let the children do whatever they want to do. I'm not talking about that era, that relationship. So when you look at the passages that speak to what would happen to us if we did not follow those instructions, to a T, they describe and they illuminate the condition of Africans all over the world, but specifically for me, the African condition in the Americas. And so that
you attended
was
the
so
gathering.
very,
You
very,
attended the gathering. What happens? The
after
elder was
that?
talking. Yeah.
Oh,
So we're talking about your journey to identifying and realizing that this is who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was eye-opening for me. It was eye-opening. It was scary. It was, why hadn't I seen this before? It was, why no one else knew this before? Why didn't anyone ever teach me this? Why did I have to come to this obscure little YMCA in dilapidated downtown Detroit, which was a ghost town? I mean, you talk about the ghettos of America, and this was 1973, 74. And so I was left to really kind of fend for myself because I wasn't getting ready to move to Detroit. I went back to Washington, and there was no teacher. There was no elder there that I knew. And so I did a kind of independent study. And I began to dig and search for what the next step for me would be. And I look up, and in 1977, I was friends with some brothers in they operated a little fruit stand, and they were Muslims. They sold bean pies and brown bread, and I had already begun to change my diet. And so they knew that I was on this quest, and they knew that I had identified as being a Hebrew. And so they gave me a flyer one day, and the flyer was for someone speaking at Howard University, and it was on the following day, and it was all so timely. And I showed up at the lecture at Howard, and it was brothers and sisters who were sent from Jerusalem, sent from the community in 1973. I'm sorry, 77. 77. They were sent from Dimona, Israel, by our spiritual leader for the very purpose of establishing a community and teaching these things in Washington, D.C. And I became the first brother from Washington, D.C. Because when I heard them speaking, and when I looked at a movie that they showed, this was before modern videos and what have you.
Were you in a bioscope?
What I saw had me on the edge of my seat.
Okay.
And
what is it that you saw?
I saw men and women and children who were comfortable in their own skin, who were teaching and living lives that were positive and lives of purpose. And it just resonated. It was a short clip, maybe 10-minute clip. It was what CBS News didn't use. They had come and filmed the community, but good news in black communities doesn't make the evening news. If it was somebody shooting and mass shooting and cutting and prostitution and what have you, that would have made the news. But they put this in archives, but we had a copy of it, and it resonated with me. I saw strength on the brothers' faces. I saw power. I saw dignity and royalty in the sisters. And I said, I want to be part of that. And it resonated with me. And from that moment on, I knew that this was my destiny. And the following year is when I left America and came to Israel, and the rest is history.
Is it a matter of DNA? Is it a matter of lineage? Is it a matter of identifying with certain qualities or characteristics of these Hebrew Israelite African people? How does one get to understand and identify as one of you?
Genetics, biology, ancestry can play a part. It will point you in a direction. But ultimately, you have to ask the question, what does this have to do with being called of God, for a particular purpose? And we can go back to the first Hebrew. Who was the first Hebrew? It was Abraham. But if we were talking about DNA and genes and biology, wouldn't we be talking about Abraham being a Chaldean? How did he convert from being a Chaldean to a Hebrew? And also, when you look in the book of Isaiah, I believe it's the 56th chapter, where it talks about that strangers can get a name and a place greater than of sons and daughters of God by virtue of their obedience to the plan.
Okay.
And so it really ultimately, in the end, does not have to do with genealogy, but I have to be honest and say that in the beginning, it was important to orient us, that there's no question about it, that 2, 3, 4,000 years ago, that the people of Israel, that geographical location called Israel, the state of Israel, but I'm actually talking about a much bigger entity than the New Jersey-sized state of Israel. I'm talking about that ancient region, that promised land, that actually, according to what was promised to the seed of Abraham, was from the Nile to the Euphrates. So that's much, much bigger than the modern state of Israel. But nevertheless, those regions, those were African people. They were dark-skinned people. And in order to properly interpret the Bible, in order to properly orient ourselves and to move forward and bring the light, bring peace to the planet, it's got to be interpreted from from an African perspective. Other than that, you're not going to be quite right on the dial. And you know what happens if you got 99.8 on your radio dial and it's 99.7. Okay, you're going to get some static.
Static, yeah.
All right.
Okay. But therefore, you are a descendant of those people.
That is how we relate to it. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And how does someone else realize what you came to realize? How do I know? Say I'm also a descendant of those people. My assumption would be that they moved, or they were moved from there to wherever. Can we talk about that? And then how does one then link themselves to those people who were moved from there to wherever they were moved? Please also touch on who is now occupying that space and creating all these wars and what that is about. Is it a spiritual thing? Is it just people living and fighting for space?
Got you. No, we've got to go back to history. And the history of Israel, the history of Jerusalem, the history of Judah and the other tribes of Israel, is that basically, I mean, if I was to sum up the history of the Old Testament, and that's trickery too, old and new. You get a new car, what do you do with the old? Of course, the old doesn't have any. You got a new dress, the old one might still be in the closet, but it's not in the front. So that whole idea, we would simply say the Hebrew Testament and the Greek Testament.
Okay.
And there's a big difference, okay? But
Hebrew being the so-called old and the Greek being the so-called new.
Yes. Okay. So I would sum up the history of the Old Testament by saying that it was that relationship with the children of Israel, with the God of Israel, and as a father, as in relating to God as a father, he had children who were stubborn, rebellious, evil, wicked, backsliding, stiff-necked, and there's lots of other adjectives that go with that. So a father who has a child like that or children like that, at some point, you throw them out of your house.
Yeah.
Get out of my house. You're not my son. You're not my daughter. You get evicted. And the history of Israel was that they were scattered. They were put out of that land. And so which way did they go? If the Romans are the final power, who dispersed Israel in the year 70, then would it make sense that Israelites would flee to the north where the Romans were coming from? Or would they flee in a southerly direction away from the Roman incursions? The latter makes sense, military sense and common sense.
Okay.
Now, you're also talking...
I'm listening to you. I'm trying to jot down notes here for my questions. I don't want to interrupt
okay.
you.
No, it's
Carry
cool.
talking.
I'm with you. I can multitask too.
Okay.
You're talking about a text that mentions Egypt and Ethiopia 1,500 times. So I'm saying that the Bible is an African text. And historically, before this, Israel had a long history of moving back and forth between Israel and Egypt. So it would not have been far-fetched for them to move into Egypt where they could find solace, find peace, find sanctuary. But because we were exiled by the Creator, we had a date with destiny. Those prophecies I was speaking, those curses I was speaking to you about. So when you look at the fleeing of the Israelites from Northeast Africa deeper into Africa, you know, there was a long history of connection. When you talk about biblical texts mentioning Ethiopia and Egypt more than 1,500 times. So in search of refuge from this vicious Roman dispersion, we sought refuge deeper into Africa. And when you begin to look at different African ethnic groups, they have what they call historical narratives or migration sagas that actually link many of them back to Israel. They may be in West Africa now. They may be in South Africa now. They may be in various parts of Africa and in fact, across the water in the Western Hemisphere. But the narrative, when you look at the migration patterns, it all begins to make sense. It was a scattered and shattered history. And so in piecing that together, many other African ethnic groups also can connect their ancestry back to Israel. So look in West Africa, you have the Ashanti, you have the Ewe, you have the Ga, the Fulani, you have the Yoruba and Igbo. And 60% of the people of African ancestry who landed in the port of Charleston, South Carolina, were known to be Igbos.
Okay.
So there's that link, that thread of cultural continuity. When you begin to look here in South Africa, amongst the Zulu and Xhosa, you will find that they do have many Hebraic connections.
Okay.
Circumcision, separation of the woman after childbirth, separation during their menstrual cycle. Even linguistic connections exist. I was in the theater, the big theater in town, the Market Theater. I was at the Market Theater, and myself and Becky Koza were looking for someone, and I was asking, is he here? And she said, Ukona, and I said, what did you just say? And she didn't want to say. I said, but did you just ask someone, is he here? Because Ukona.
Yeah, that's how I would say it.
Hukan is how in Hebrew we would ask, Hukan, is he here? And so those kind of things, you know, again, they've been shattered and scattered, but I think that if we spend time to actually look at them, that they'll connect.
Is it Hebrew? Is it Yiddish? What is it?
Hebrew?
Yeah.
Well, Yiddish is Yiddish. Yiddish is actually a German dialect that uses Hebraic characters, Hebrew letters, but it's a German dialect.
Okay. So when you talk about this similarity between Ukona and the other term,
Hebrew,
Hukan, you speaking Hebrew.
That's Hebrew.
Okay.
Yeah, which is classified officially as a African language.
Okay.
And one more group, because it hits home.
Yeah.
The Lemba here.
I know of the Lemba. Heard of the Lemba.
Northern South Africa and southern Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Well, one of the European anthropologists who I know very well, Tudor Parfit, he was studying and understudying or getting information from Professor Mativa about the connection of the Buba clan of the Lemba to Israel.
Are these people in Limpopo?
In Limpopo,
Yeah.
in that area, up in the northern area.
So-called Venda people, or
Venda,
they've
exactly.
integrated into Venda
Yeah.
and Karanga people in Zimbabwe, or Karanga
Yeah.
or Shona people in Zimbabwe.
Shout out to Juju.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
we
Julius.
Julius,
Malema.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, and he's aware of these things. I got a story to tell about him another time. But when you look at those connections, and what this professor did, what this anthropologist did, was to bring a geneticist. Professor Mativa authorized it. The geneticist came and did DNA sample, and the DNA studies show that the Lemba indeed are linked to the DNA of Israel.
Okay.
And not just that they are linked to it, but their linkage is closer than the so-called Ashkenazic Kohen line. But there was...
Ashkenaz would be a white...
the white European Jew.
Okay.
Yeah. But there was no outpouring of let's welcome our brothers, let's bring the Lemba, to Israel, like they do the Ukrainians or they do, any
Are
others
those
around
also
the world.
authentic, these white Ashkenazi? Are they descendants of that land?
I'm not an expert in how they connect.
Okay.
I make it my business to advocate for how we connect.
Okay, cool.
And I don't allow them to be the standard for our meeting their standards for connecting.
Let's focus on us.
Yeah.
You speak of identity. I get that. So we scattered, we left. Some went westwards. Some crossed the waters.
Yes.
Some went downwards to maybe Central Africa,
Yes.
maybe Southern Africa.
Yes.
I always hear of the 12 tribes. I don't know if of Judah or Israel.
Yeah.
Can you just speak a bit on that after you have explained that one? I want us now to speak to the purpose
Okay.
of these people and the descendants of these people.
That's a great transition.
Cool.
Well, the 12 tribes were the offspring of 12
tribes of
sons.
what?
The 12 tribes of Israel.
Oh, okay.
Abraham, the first Hebrew. Abraham begot Isaac.
Okay.
Isaac begot Jacob.
Yeah.
Jacob's name was changed to Israel.
After he fought with the
After
angel
he
or
wrestled
God.
with the angel.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there's two versions. In one version, he's wrestling with an angel, and the other, he's wrestling with God. Right? Very, very, very astute of you. But nevertheless, he gets the name Israel, one who has power with the Creator. And on Israel's deathbed, he brings all of his sons to him, and he outlines what those sons would be doing in the last days.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
But so when you talk about the 12 tribes, those are the offspring of those 12 sons. And so
Do you want to name them and maybe link them to who we are today?
I'd hate
Or
to
could
leave,
that be a story for another day?
That's a story for
Okay,
another day,
cool.
and I don't want to leave one of them out.
Yeah, all right.
We primarily identify with Judah.
Okay.
And the reason for that is when you look at what Judah was called to do in the latter days, Judah would be the lion, like a lion's whelp. That's where you get the idea of the conquering lion of Judah. And what would this lion conquer? This lion was, Judah was like the big brother.
Okay.
I don't know if you came from a big family. I didn't.
Very big family.
You have a big family. So you know that there are brothers and sisters that you wouldn't call to get with you in a fight. But there's some brothers that you would want with you in a fight. There's somebody else that would be the diplomat, or somebody else to fix your baki or something. Everybody's got their portion to play. Judah's portion was that would be the lineage, the seed through which the messianic personage would flow. And that would also be, Judah was the one who said he would have his hand upon the enemy's neck. So Judah was like, again, the big brother. Other brothers didn't have that calling. So in the beginning of our reclamation of this identity, Judah would come first. Judah was that entity. So that's how we identify. But in that passage, this is the 49th chapter of Genesis, by the way.
Okay.
When Israel bestows these roles and purposes upon his sons, it is there that you find that Judah again would be had a purpose. And so that is what kind of roots us, and that's what distinguishes us in Israel from all of the other Israelites in America or anywhere else that you find them.
Okay.
We're the only organized, in fact, we're the only organized group of African Americans who are back on the continent.
Are you generally all big people? I'm thinking of the guys I've hosted who are always speaking on this topic. Bishop Nathanyel is quite hefty. You are quite hefty. Ron is quite hefty. Or is it the chicken that you eat with the brine?
Am I hefty or
No, in
tall?
terms of stature, you're quite tall and you have
Yeah.
a presence.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of that comes from working in those fields 400 or 500 years ago. You know, but nevertheless, I mean, we do tend to be tall.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's no chance of me being because I'm a small guy.
If you changed eating tofu right now, it's not going to help you. I don't think. You know?
Okay.
But it's gonna help you in other areas.
All right.
Yeah.
Identity. I think we've spoken about it. Now, what is the purpose? Is the purpose of Judah the same as the purpose of another tribe in the 12 tribes of Israel?
Yeah. The roles were different.
Okay.
The roles are different. But in assuming our purpose, and that's important for us, and what distinguishes us from these other different Hebraic communities, is that first of all we're very nationalistic. You know, in other words, we voted with our feet. We have no future in America.
Okay.
We're not waiting either. We feel that the idea of waiting for someone to come and save us out of the sky is a Greco-Roman holdover.
Okay.
And that all of that needs to be shed from our consciousness and our understanding. But one of the primary fundamental tenets is that we've moved from the knowledge of identity,
Okay.
which is where you'll find Bishop Nathanyel and others, and Ron, knowledge of identity to the knowledge of purpose.
Let's delve a bit on that. I don't know if you said it on air or whilst we're still off air that you are not a religious movement or a church,
Right.
Right?
Right.
So you focus more on identity and your purpose.
Yeah.
But you keep referring to what I would call a religious book, and now you seem to be disagreeing with that religious book in terms of the Messiah who we are looking to come and save us from this world. And you're saying we are looking at the wrong thing. We are actually looking at what has been given to us by the
Greco-Roman culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll ask you this. You're, as most Africans are Christian.
Yeah.
Safe to say.
A lot.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so where then is your spiritual center?
Is this a trick question? I don't know. Spiritual center.
You could interpret it that way, but no. Where actually is the spiritual center of your belief system?
Our Mecca?
Yes.
Our Jerusalem?
Yes.
Okay.
Is it Jerusalem or is it Rome?
Okay. Now I get you. Okay.
It's Rome.
I get you because of my Adventist background.
Adventism,
I get you. I know. because of my-
Protestantism, Anglicanism. Of course, there your spiritual center would be Canterbury. But I must ask the follow-up question then: when did the spiritual center of the Bible shift?
Mine is not Rome because of my background as an Adventist, right?
Why
I
wouldn't
don't
it
know
be?
how much you know about Adventism,
Why wouldn't
Seventh
it be?
Adventism.
It's a Christian.
We're
is it not
actually
a breakaway
opposing what Rome mainly stands for, right?
but it still was a
fundamentally.
breakaway from
Okay,
the Roman
okay.
idea.
I think I would get you to a certain
Yeah.
extent, the Trinity doctrine and all those things. Those are
There you
Roman
go.
doctrines.
That's
Okay.
where we're talking about. And so what I'm saying is that where did these ideas come from that have been interpreted of heaven in the sky, of life, of a life after you die? Our message is that when you really interpret Scripture from an authentic and truthful African perspective, using the Hebraic language and what things meant, we would have to say that religion taught you that you will die and go to heaven or hell, and that really what's going to happen, or what has already happened, is that you have already died and gone to hell. That's
Sar
troubling, isn't it?
Ahmadiel, I want us to be simple about this thing, because now I want to engage you on this matter. But I have a feeling that could be a conversation on its own. Maybe we'll have
Yeah.
a follow-up interview. Here's something I'm trying to introduce on the channel. Is hosting someone, engaging them personally,
Yeah.
like we're doing right now, but at a later stage, a week or two after we have published the episode, have the audience engage them via a live stream. So I'd have to invite you here, or you can do it at your place, but we'll do a live stream and have people actually interrogate whatever claims you have and question you on these things.
I
Is
have
that
no
something
problem
you'd be
I
willing
have
to
no
do?
problem with that.
Okay, so we have a date.
but
2 weeks after we publish,
Great.
we'll get back at it. Maybe
Okay.
we'll interrogate these things.
Okay.
2 hours, 3 hours.
Okay.
Okay.
No problem. But let's go back to the concept you spoke of, the Messiah. The Messiah is a Hebraic concept.
Okay.
Christos is not a Hebraic concept.
So we're still talking about the Greco-Roman
That's Greco-Roman.
theology or
Exactly.
ideology.
So in the Hebraic understanding of what a Messiah or Mashiach was, it was not a singular concept. In other words, there's no expectation in the Hebraic text of a singular person to come and save us. It's a plural concept. In Hebraic culture and history,
Give us references.
the book of Obadiah. The book of Obadiah speaks of saviors shall come up on Mount Zion. Saviors, plural. There's no one savior that we should be expecting.
Could it not be a matter of interpretation? Because we always have those issues when we interpreting from ancient Hebrew texts to English to Issaquah or whatever language.
When you go to the Dead Sea Scrolls and the passage in Isaiah that's widely used of the suffering servant, when you deal with that, what you'll find there in the very first time in 2,000 years when a copy of the book of Isaiah had come to light, the term there is not Mashiach. That's the singular. The term is Mishikim. But when you translate
Which would mean?
plural, messiahs,
Oh, okay.
okay, plural messianic or
Yeah.
anointed personages. But when you translate
Which would come
that
at the
to
same time or in
anointed,
different eras in your understanding?
both.
Okay.
Both.
Okay.
Because in ancient Hebraic culture, all of the kings, all of the prophets, all of the wise men and elders would have been given the appellation Mashiach. It was a term of recognition that this is someone who's the anointing, the being chosen,
Yeah.
being endowed with a spirit of discernment and what have you.
Okay.
So it was a plural concept. And so in the Dead Sea Scrolls, when they get to that passage, it doesn't say Mashiach. It says Mishikim. Could that
Messiahs.
be the Messiahs?
saviors.
Could that be the reason why the Catholic Church suppressed the release of the Dead Sea Scrolls translation for 30 plus years? We think so. Because that's a fundamental tenet of Christian belief, that we should be waiting for this one individual. And in his own words, in the book of Matthew, in his own words, Yeshua says that there would be many who shall come after me. Have I not sent many unto you? As a hen, would gather her chicks under her wings, and you rebelled, you would not, you rebelled and refused this. He said, your house shall remain unto you desolate until ye say, blessed is he that cometh in the name of Yah.
Amen.
So, and many have been sent, but most of them were rejected.
What's the purpose of the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem?
We go back to the prophetic purpose that was mandated and given to different individuals over the Hebraic history. It was written that through Abraham's seed, in Abraham's seed, that all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. So if you identify as a Hebrew, and by the way, a Hebrew is not necessarily just an Israelite, you can also be an Ishmaelite. So in other words, what generally has been followers of Abraham, not Abraham, but Muhammad, they're actually Ishmaelites. And so that was a much bigger family than just the Israelite family. So Hebrews would be those through that seed that all the nations would be blessed. An Israelite was told that they would be the light, they would have to bring light unto the nations. So how do we identify light? We're not talking about just, here in the studio and these light sources. We're talking about morality. We're not talking about scientific prowess. We're not talking about financial. We're not talking about, certainly not talking about military might, but that is how the state of Israel does interpret being a light unto the nations, okay? But we're talking about a morality or a relationship with the Creator that would be observable in your health, in your countenance, in your teachings, in your culture, in your music. We were speaking off camera about certain elements coming from the African American community, and I said very clearly that all African Americans don't need to come to Africa. They need to stay right where they are because a plane ride is not going to change them. They cannot bring that decadence and evil into the Edenic lands, the lands of paradise, the African paradisical lands. And so our purpose is to be that light. And how is that manifest? Well, let's take something like transportation. Everybody's talking about electric vehicles now. But electric vehicles, are not the answer to the transportation problem, to the pollution problem. Everybody on the earth cannot have their own car, whether it's regular or an electric vehicle. Why? Because to plug in an electric vehicle, at the end of those transmission lines, somebody's burning something still. Yeah. So that's not changing the atmosphere. That's not changing climate change. That's not changing the threat to our existence. The problem is consumption. Everybody doesn't need a car. It's a waste. Why sit in traffic 2-3 hours a day going to and from work when you could share? And you would have much, much more ease of movement around. And even the whole idea of even working these jobs, that's another whole idea. Economics. A lot of people will say that the system's not working. Well, maybe the system is working. Maybe it's the system that's the problem, that it actually is working. Let's take development as a concept. So development is, as a former journalist, or you still in journalism, if a new hospital was being built in one of the provinces, tomorrow's Star or Citizen would report that, we're making progress. But we would have to say, hold on a minute. If you're building new hospitals, doesn't that mean that you expect more of your citizenry to be sick and dying? So we wouldn't call that progress. We would call progress having to destroy a hospital or to convert it to a senior citizens resource center or a school or tear it down and make a park. That for us would be genuine progress.
Now you are shining your light. Let's interrogate this light. And you're speaking about a matter that's relevant to me as an Adventist, relevant to me because I've had relatives who passed away during COVID, a lot. Tough time for my family. My mother passed away from cancer. Okay. Her mother passed away from cancer. But we follow a faith, a religion that advocates for healthy eating, healthy living.
Yes.
But somehow we're not doing it. But we know research, we know stats. People like Oprah have gone to, you'll probably know of this, Loma Linda University, I don't know if you would, an Adventist institution in the States
in California.
Who's known, or a community that is known for living longer than a lot of communities around the world. It's a blue district.
That's whatever they call it. Right.
Yeah. Let's talk about, because what you just spoken of, building hospitals is not progress, but it speaks to a problem that we are facing.
Yes.
Shed your light on this issue of lifestyle and a better way of living.
Okay, there's nothing more fundamental for the human family than to eat. It is one of the two major biological drives, of course, to eat and to have sex. And both of them have to do with longevity, continuing the posterity of the generations and to sustain us on this level in these bodies. And so we have to eat, have to consume, and average people 3 square meals a day, as they say, which is actually too much. It's overconsumption in many ways. But it's interesting that biblically, in the first chapter of the first book, you get instructions that give you what you should eat for your food. I've given you every green herb bearing seed, and it shall be to you for your food, or in some versions will say for your meat. And so why then is that? Why would it be in the first chapter? It's central. It's a huge fundamental need and a law for us to sustain that relationship. So, of course, we all know that later Moses allowed the Israelites to eat this animal, don't eat that animal, don't touch that animal. You can eat these birds, but don't eat that bird, and likewise for certain species of fish. Well, what was the difference? Certain of them were considered to be unclean. They were predators. They were literal scavengers and sucking the bottom of the ocean. And they were, as they say, you are what you eat. So if you're sucking the filth and waste of other creatures, then, those beasts are filthy.
Yeah.
But you have to understand, and so a lot of people would say, well, that's contradictory. That what is in there in the very first book that Moses was attributed to writing, and Moses later says you can eat these animals. Well, that's a contradiction. It's a contradiction only in the context, in the historical context. Later, Moses is talking to the children of Israel who had just come out of a 400-year captivity in ancient Egypt, and they were eating everything.
Like South Africans do, like Americans do today.
And brag about it. And so consider a plane that has gone into a dive, because that's what happened with the ancient Israelites. They went into a cultural dive. They became degenerate. They began doing all manner of things. And so Moses, being their shepherd at that appointed time, Moses is trying to bring them back out of the dive and then get them eventually back up to the original. But he's got to start somewhere. So dietary discipline is one of the most toughest disciplines to master.
Sugar,
meat, salt, all those things. It's oil. We're biologically wired a certain kind of way, and we have adversaries who understand that. And I'm not just talking about
your FDA.
The FDA. They are controlled by the larger the livestock industry and the dairy industry and the food manufacturers, so that becomes central. And so our spiritual leader went back to that very first instruction, and we became vegans, strict vegans. The entire community, all 3,000 of us, are strict vegans. And if someone was to violate those laws and eat something with eggs or milk in it, it would be a major issue for us. And so we've grown accustomed to it because we've been doing it for 55 years now. And so it's second nature for us. And there's a consequence for that behavior. Those changes have meant changes for us, so much so that when doctors from Harry Medical School in Nashville, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt, another Tennessee university, came to Israel and did random blood pressure tests. They did blood pressure tests, and they did the cholesterol level tests. The findings were that we as a community were off the charts low compared to the African in America. And it's not rocket science, it's lifestyle. It's nutritional choices, it's stress-free living. It's the idea that we make it mandatory that everybody in the community get a full body massage once a month. It's the fact that we do not smoke. And on that note, just consider that if a Moses personage was to come to our people today in 2024, would not one of the 10 commandments be thou shalt not smoke, or thou shalt not consume golden syrup, which science has proven it literally, in America, they call it high fructose corn syrup. I think here in London and other places, they call it golden syrup.
Okay.
Sounds harmless, but high fructose corn syrup is concentrated from the corn, and they know that it sends a signal. There's a signal that comes from your gut, and goes to your brain that says, I'm full, stop eating. But high fructose corn syrup overrides that signal,
Okay.
which, do you think the manufacturers of all this fast food and processed food would say, oh, we can't keep using that? No, they raised a toast in the boardrooms. Why? Because they know the people won't be able to put the food down. They're going to continue to eat. And now you've got obesity, you've got high blood pressure, you've got rampant kidney failure. All of these things due to something as fundamental as diet. You 30, 40, 50 years ago in South Africa did not consume a fraction of the amount of meat that you consume now. And I know the Zulu culture, I know the Xhosa culture, I know everyone in Africa like to brag about how their culture centers around meat. Not true. It wasn't like that initially. And a lot of the meat consumption was due to the fact that you were driven from place to place and you didn't have the time to plant crops, nurture the crops, and harvest the crops. You were moving from place to place and you had to rely on animals for your sustenance. And so now it's become like, oh, this is part of our culture and our lifestyle. But it's not. And now, 30, 40, 50 years now, you have the incidence of disease that far outstrips what you were accustomed to, what your parents and your grandparents were aware of in their time.
How do we go back? Because there's a fast food restaurant popping up in every street corner.
Oh.
Everywhere we go. My hometown, Eqonce,
Yeah.
King Williamstown, which you've been to.
Yeah.
It's a small town, and we take pride in these things. We've got a Burger King, we've got a McDonald's, we've got about 3 or 4
Chicken
KFCs,
Licken.
we've got a Chicken Licken,
Yeah.
and we're like, yeah, we've got all these fast foods. And we take pride because we don't want to do anything in the kitchen. We just want to go out instant. How do we take ourselves out of this thing? We're talking about Israel. You say I must go there, see how you guys live. I'm still I'm still two ways about it because I'm thinking there are guys that say, no, Israel is
Israel's here.
And you say, no, it's there.
Right.
But we say it's a mountainous area, lush green, a promised land of milk and honey.
Yeah.
And what we see on TV, right, because we haven't been, are these visuals of a dry, barren land.
Yeah.
And this can't be Canaan. This can't be the promised land.
Yeah.
And now we are in these cities. We are living these lifestyles.
Yeah.
We need to leave these cities and go to I'm going to use this word. I don't know if it's a Hebrew word or a Yiddish word. A kibbutz way maybe of living.
Kibbutz is just a social structure.
Okay.
We actually are a kibbutz. Where we live in Dimona, we're an urban kibbutz. We're regarded as an urban kibbutz. It's simply communal living.
Okay.
It's a community.
Oh, okay.
It's the idea of sharing, and we're saying that that's really a traditional African way of life. But this idea of getting a house and having to put barbed wire around it and gates and armed guards and fake armed response signs on your front, that's not how we are destined to live. That's not living. And so we're pushing another model for existence, and it's got to be based on two words that our spiritual leader imbibed in us. And one is that you have to get to a point where there is enough. That you can get to a point where you can say, I've got enough to take care of myself, my needs, my family. What do you need with a 20-room house and it's just you and your 2 children? That's a waste. So live within our means. Let's not set a standard that sends a message to others that is unattainable for them. We know that this economic system is unsustainable. Everybody knows it, but who's making the decisions to say, let's downsize, let's create community where we take care of elders, where we look after each other, and we don't entice people to have to steal and rob because we're letting them go without. There's enough to go around if we only structured our economics on that. And in antiquity, and in just 40, 50, 60 years ago, we did those things. So enough, and the other word is share.
Amen. That's how I say it. I don't know
Yeah.
how you say it, but I want
Amen.
to go a little bit back to the issue of jobs and working. I think you touched a bit on it.
Yeah.
I think there was a technical thing I had to fix. So the overconsumption, how it relates to the system and how the system requires of us to be these modern day slaves. Can you speak a bit on that, and then we'll close it off?
Maybe I'll let Nehemiah speak to that.
Please do.
Nehemiah in the 9th chapter, and see this goes, and a lot of people will say that the Bible is a white man's book. I won't even go any further in discussion with those individuals because they've only revealed to me that they don't understand the Bible. How could a book be a white man's book that mentions Egypt and Ethiopia 1,500 times? Something's wrong there. But I understand the argument, and I understand how they arrived at that particular analysis. But in the book of Nehemiah, in the 9th chapter, the Nehemiah, as is in Hebrew, Nehemiah is revisiting the history of the Israelites and all of the rebellion and all of what caused them to be rebuked and chastised.
Okay.
And what we're in essence saying is that the African condition is directly correlative to our distance from God. When we restore that relationship, the blessings will start to flow. But if we don't, in fact, this is Nehemiah, he's testifying, he's saying, now therefore our God, the great, the mighty, and the awe-inspiring God, who keepeth covenant and mercy, let not all the trouble seem little before thee that hath come upon us, on our kings, on our priests, on our prophets, on our fathers, and on all thy people, since the time of the kings of Assyria unto this day. He says, however, thou, God, are just in all that is brought upon us. So there's something, we can't curse God by looking at our condition. What have you done? It's something that we did to bring this upon ourselves. Now, neither have our kings, our princes, our priests, nor our fathers kept thy law. They didn't keep the dietary law. They didn't keep the social law. They didn't keep the economic laws. Law is simply instructions, okay? And when you violate law, there are consequences. And thy testimonies which thou didst testify against them, for they have not served thee in their kingdom, and in thy great goodness that thou gavest them, and in the large and fat land of Africa, which thou gavest before them, neither turned they from their wicked works. Now, here we go. Behold, we are servants this day, and for the land that thou gavest unto our fathers to eat its fruit and its good, behold, we are servants in it. And it, this land, yieldeth much increase unto the kings whom thou hast set over us because of our sins. When you talk about increase, I see the copper when I'm in Zambia going to the railway going to China. I see the gold in Ghana and the cocoa in Ghana. I saw the Ghanaian farmers being sent to China to teach Chinese farmers how to raise cocoa. I see the timber. I see, name the resource in Africa. It's not our increase. It says, and it yieldeth much increase unto the kings whom thou, God, has set over us. So, also they have dominion over our bodies and over our cattle at their pleasure, and we are in great distress. Who does this describe? Who is this prophecy fitting of, if not African people? So we have to correct, if God is a father, a parent, and if parents issue allowances to their children, and if a child is irresponsible with his few rand of allowance, would the father, would the parents arrange to leave the whole inheritance to them?
No.
He will withhold
Yeah.
that until he realizes that his son or
responsible
daughter
enough.
got some sense.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that obviously, being spiritual people, the Creator has withheld blessings from us until we get it together and be intelligent with the great resources that we have. Otherwise, we would hasten the destruction of the entire planet, and that's not the Creator's will.
Do we need to talk on how to do this, or have we been speaking enough? We need to now get hold of our inheritance, or is the Father just holding it back until we get our act together and then he will release it? Because the inheritance is there. We have all these things
there.
here.
But there's
But
a
we
formula.
are not in control.
There's a formula. And formulas have to be learned, and formulas have to be taught. We're all only doing what we've been taught. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. But if you read that scripture carefully, if you go back a few verses, it's not talking about the knowledge of Witz. It's not talking about the knowledge of Nelson Mandela. It's not talking about Stellenbosch.
What knowledge is it talking about?
It's talking about the knowledge of God. And I'm not talking about through religious institutions. I'm talking about the simple day-to-day lifestyle, practical, everyday truth. That's what we're talking about here. That has to be taught. And if you want to change your condition, you got to change your direction. The direction's not going to change until the message changes. And the message is not going to change until the mindset changes. We at Jerusalem represent the change of mindset, a new teaching going forth. And that's why I'm here. And hopefully that's, hopefully what the audience will hear and realize that we do need a change of direction. We do need to hear a new message. And hey, all beginnings are small.
Please
all
look
beginnings are hard.
at the camera and just say a word to someone who finds inspiration in what you have to say, and how they could move from a point of ignorance to a point of abundance in terms of knowledge, and this education, information that you say won't come from Witz, won't come from Nelson Mandela,
Yeah.
won't come from a Roman Catholic church, won't come from a Seventh-day Adventist church, but will come from the knowledge of knowing God and understanding God's purpose for our lives.
God in the book of Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel refers to the Creator as a God of truth. In the English, in the King James Version, it will actually say the God of truth. I'm sorry, the true God. That's how it's written in English. But it's actually in Hebrew, it's the God of truth. It's a big difference, not the true God versus the God of truth. And so truth is always central. And you hear it in the New Testament. You hear it in Yeshua's words, who said, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." And so truth becomes the common denominator for what we must align ourselves with if we intend to align ourselves with the Creator. It's truth. And everybody doesn't have a personal truth. Everybody's, can't have a personal truth. You may have a personal perspective about something or a personal context, but truth is the truth. And the truth is that a Greco-Roman interpretation of the Bible and the Greco-Roman culture in which we find ourselves living in 2024 on the planet, because this is that system. This is the global system. It's a Greco-Roman idea that has overtaken the planet. That idea has taught us that we must live our lives of suffering, and we must have patience, and we must await a day after we die. And then, only after we die, do we get our reward in heaven. And I'm here to share with you simply that truth teaches us something quite different, that you and I have already died. Remember, in the day that you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, in that day you should surely die. And we know from the record that Adam and Eve did not fall over physically dead. So what was this death? What was the death that was spoken of and promised as a consequence of that that knowledge of good and evil. And so what I'm saying is that we must look at what death is from a biblical Hebraic idea. And when you do that, you'll realize that it's a consciousness. It's a death of consciousness. It's a cultural death. It's not a physical death. But if you don't correct the cultural, if you don't correct the consciousness, yes, it will ultimately lead to the physical death. But nevertheless, our message to you, truth teaches us that we have already died and we have gone to hell. Our environments, our communities, our neighborhoods, our cities, our countries, our continent, and indeed life for all humanity on the planet. This dehumanization that's run rampant all over the globe is a direct result of our disobedience and our having already died and gone to hell. And the only thing that will resurrect us is the true knowledge of God that will come in the last days, as it was prophesied in the book of Isaiah, that in the last days, that the truth, that the light, that knowledge, that people would journey to Jerusalem to be taught a different way, a different mindset, and you would reap different results. So I pray that it has been a source of inspiration for you, that it will prompt you to consider what's been said, that it will point you in a different direction, and that you can change the consequences, that you can change your actual condition. And the beauty of it is that you're not just guessing about this, because you have families of 3,000 plus in Israel, several thousand across Africa, and indeed here, several hundred here in South Africa, who've been following these tenets and teachings and lifestyle choices, dietary choices, social, economic choices. And there are consequences. There are consequences of blessings that we can now share and you can look at, and they are part of this formula. So you can't tamper with the formula. If a formula is being offered to you and it says this will work, you can't change it now. You can't take a little bit here and there. You got to take the whole formula. But I guarantee that when you apply it, that you too will be blessed. So with that, Brother Dinano, I'm appreciative of the opportunity, of the invitation. I'm appreciative of the time we've taken. And indeed, we did have a few hitches here and there, but we realized later that it had to happen that way in order for us to get to a certain understanding between us. And so I'm looking forward to the next time, to the session that we'll have live with your audience, and see what we can build on.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Be
Hallelujah.
blessed.
We thank y'all.